2.8 Distance and midpoint circles. Find the distance between the pair of points. If necessary, express the answer in simplified radical form, and then round to 2 decimal places. Okay, so we want to find the distance between a pair of points. Okay, so we already went over how to do this. We're going to use the distance formula. And again, it's just a modified form of the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so let's write the distance formula. So the distance formula is equal to the square root of, okay, x2 minus x1, that's the side of one of the legs, you subtract to find it, plus y2 minus y1 squared, and that's the other leg, right? That's the other leg. So this could be, for instance, A, and that could be B. Okay, so let's label it. So let's say this is point 1, and this is x1, and this is y1. And let's say we label the next one as point 2, which means we could say this one is x2, and we could say this one is y2. Okay, at this point, we can just plug everything in. Whoops, distance is equal to, right? Now, I can just look at the difference. What's the difference between a 9 and a 4? It's 5. That's the length, right? What's the difference between a 10 and a 22? 12. That's the difference. So that's what that leg is going to be. But I will do it algebraically, but just realize that quite a few of these you can just do mentally, figure the distance of the legs, and that you could just do that mentally, right? So x2, again, is a 4. 4 minus 9. And you square it. 4 minus 9 is negative 5. And then you square it, which gives you a negative 5 times a negative 5, which gives you a 25. Okay, let's try the other one. So we have a y2 being 22. And we have y1, which is a 10. So 22 minus 10. 22 minus 10 is a 12. And you square it, which gives me 144. Right? And 25 plus 144 is 169. And the square root of 169 is a 13. So we end up with a nice little 13 there. Okay. We want to express the answer in a simplified radical form and then round to 2 decimal places. In this case, you're done because it actually gave you a nice round number. So you don't have to worry about that one. It's a nice counting number there. All right, let's try the other one though. Okay, so again, what's the difference between a 6 and a 9? 3. What's the difference between a 4 and a 7? 3. So again, I mean, feel free to do this mentally at a certain point once you get the hang of it. But I will write everything out. So the distance formula again is x2 minus x1 squared, having technical difficulties, plus y2 minus y1 squared. There we go. And how do we find out what the x1, x2, and all the rest of it are? We can just label everything. So for instance, I would say the first point is, the first point, we would say that's point 1, and that's x1, and that's y1. And we could say, well, for instance, we'll just make this one point 2, and that would make that x2, and that would make that y2. So at this point, we would say the distance formula is equal to, we would say that's equal to x2 being a 9, x1 being a 6, and what's 9 minus 6? It's a 3, and what's 3 squared? It's a 9. Okay, and what about y2? Well, y2, it looks like it's a 7, and what's y1? It's a 4. 7 minus 4 is again a 3, right? And 3 squared is a 9, and 9 plus 9 is an 18, just like that, right? Okay, so in this case, though, we can actually simplify this radical. Okay, there's a couple of ways we can do that. Well, we don't need to write down. So it's just the square root of 18, right? One is we try to find the largest perfect square that we can factor out of there, which would be like a 9. So we can factor a 9 out. That leaves me a 2. So we turn 18 to 9 times 2. We separate that into square root of 9 times the square root of 2 into 2 separate radicals. We can simplify the square root of 9 into just a plain vanilla 3, and that leaves us the square root of 2, and that's one way to do it. The other way of doing it is you could do a prime factorization. I keep wanting to label it T, which is true, but we don't really need to have that over here. So the other way to do a prime factorization, which would be basically 2 times 3 times 3. And because there's an understood implied 2 there, because the square root, is we have to do groupings of 2 and pull it to the front. But when we pull that grouping to the front, we only write it one time, once per grouping. and whatever stays under the radical stays under the radical, and we rewrite it. Everything that's on the outside gets multiplied together, everything on the inside gets multiplied together. In this case, there was only a 2 on the inside and a 3 on the outside, so there's nothing to multiply. But just for your information, again, if there was other stuff on the outside, you would have to multiply it, and if there was stuff on the inside, you would also have to multiply that. I know that looks like a negative, but it is not. Let's try the next one. So we want to find the midpoint of these line segments with the given endpoints. Now, the previous one did say, if necessary, express the answer in a simplified radical form, and then round to 2 decimal places. Now, that part is just using a calculator. All right, so when I plug this into the calculator, I get approximately, that's what that squiggle is, approximately 4.2426406.8, blah, 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 blah. Now, you just need a one more point, then you're going to be rounding to. Since they say round to 2 decimal places right here, I only need 3 decimal places, right? So I need 2, 4, but I also need the 2. Okay, so what happens is, if I'm rounding to, if the 4 is what I'm trying to round, this place right here, right? So if I'm looking to this 4, that's where I'm trying to round. I look to the right of the 4, right? The right of the hundredths place, right of the 2 decimal places, and to the right of that I have a 2. If the number to the right is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, you round down. If it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you round up. Because I have a 2 there, I'm going to be rounding down, which means basically I disregard everything to the right of that place. So what I end up with is approximately 4.24, and again, that's because they only wanted 2 decimal places, 1, 2. So that's how I would round it, just in case you needed a reminder on how to round. Now, if I had had a 5 next to it, I would have to round up, and the way you would round up is you would add to the 4 and turn it into a 5. Now that might bring up the interesting point of, why do I not subtract whenever I round down? Well, you are subtracting, because since you lost that 2, 6, 4, blah, blah, to the right of it, the number did go down. It went smaller. It just didn't go down by a nice even 1. So I know it's kind of confusing. So when you round down, that place stays the same. Everything to the right of it goes away. That's where you round down. You lose everything to the right of it. Whenever you round up, you increase that number by 1, but then everything to the right of it again is gone. So whether you round up or down, everything to the right of that number is gone. If you round down, that number that you're interested in, that place, stays the same. If, on the other hand, you're rounding down, if you're rounding up, then you're going to increase the number. Okay, so hopefully that didn't make it more confusing. All right, so find the midpoint of the line segment with the given endpoint. So we want to find midpoints. Again, midpoint is just the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So for instance, let's say, I'll write the equation again. Midpoint is simply going to be the average of the x's. How do you find a simple average? Well, you add the x's together. And how do you find that average? You divide by 2. Well, what about the y's? How do you find the simple average of the y's? You add the y's together, you divide by 2. Okay, so you're going to do this in every one of these instances, right? So you would say, for instance, this one you would say 6 plus 2 divided by 2, and you would say 10 plus 8 divided by 2. 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. You would say 10 plus 8 is 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. Okay, so let's try the next one. So midpoint is, again, I can label this more thoroughly. Technically, you should probably be labeling this throughout the entire thing. Okay, so the midpoint in this one, we got the formula right here, so you just reference that. We're simply going to be plugging in the x values, so we say -7 plus -8 divided by 2. And then the y's are going to be -1 plus -6 divided by 2. All right, -6 plus -8 is -15 divided by 2. That doesn't really simplify. You say -1 times plus -6 is -7 divided by 2. And there you go. What about the next one? Next one's going to deal with some fractions, which isn't great, but that's okay. So you're going to have -7 thirds plus -5 thirds. And you're going to have 2 thirds plus -8 thirds all over 2. Now this is going to require a little bit of side work, so I'll just do a little bit of side work in the middle. And basically we're saying that -7 thirds plus negative 5/3. Now, since these are like fractions that they have the same denominator, we would simply add their numerators together. So you're saying negative 7 plus negative 5 over 3, right? We don't add the denominators as well. We're just going to be adding or subtracting, not this case, but if you were subtracting, you're just going to be adding and subtracting the numerators when you're dealing with like fractions. So negative 7 plus negative 5 is a negative 12. And negative 12 divided by 3 is a negative 4. Okay? Okay, so we got this one right here simplified to a negative 4. Well, that did simplify much better than I thought it was going to. Okay, so next one we have is a 2/3 plus a negative 8/3. Now again, we're dealing with like fractions. They both have a 3 denominator, so we're saying 2 plus negative 8. Well, what's 2 plus negative 8? Well, 2 plus negative 8 is a negative 6. And what's negative 6 divided by 3? Negative 2. Negative 2. Okay. And so that's the midpoint here. All right, let's try the next one. Write the standard form of equation of the circle with the given center and radius. Okay, so we need to know the general formula for the circle. It looks something like this, right? X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where r is the radius, and the center is hk. Okay, so what we're going to do is just going to plug it into that equation, basically. Now, we've already done something similar to this, but we'll go through the entire process. X minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals r squared, which is 8 squared. So essentially, I just went to the general equation, and I plugged in the variables. That's all. Now you want to simplify it a little bit. X minus 0 is just x squared is just x squared, y minus 0 is y squared is y squared, and 8 squared is 64. We got it. Okay, let's try the next one over here. So now we have a center of 4, 3. Okay, so we're going to have x minus 4 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 5 squared. Okay, now at this point we probably want to square the 5 squared and put 25 there instead. We're just going to leave this in a factored form. If you don't want to leave it in the factored form, you could just expand this by squaring these. There are patterns for that. We're going to leave these in factored forms to kind of keep it simple right now. Okay, let's try the next one. So we have a center of negative 6, 8. So again, we just plug everything in there, right? So it's x minus the x value of negative 6. Again, make sure you're subtracting a negative 6 and not just subtracting 6. Those are different. You can make a sign error there very easily if you're not careful. Okay. And the next one is going to be plus. And now you're dealing with the y's. Y minus, in this case, an 8. And then we square it is equal to 10, which is the radius, and then we square it. Okay, so x minus negative 6, which is the same as x plus 6 squared, plus y minus 8. We're just simply going to leave that one for now. And again, you could expand these if you need to. And 10 squared is simply 100. What about the next one? Well, it's going to be x minus negative 5 plus y minus y, the y in this point right here, which is a 0. And then we have 6 squared, which is the radius. I didn't label it, but you could label this if you need to. You can put that 0.1, x1, y1, and you can even label this right here as 0.1, x1, y1. That's not really necessary. Okay, so we're going to square the 6. X minus negative 5 is x plus 5 squared plus y minus 0, which is just simply a y squared. So we just put a y squared there. We don't even need the parenthesis at this point. And then we say 6 squared is simply 36. And that's it.